Two teams, one dream, zero titles, but that story changes because for one of India or South Africa, they are set to reach the promised land when they clash to decide the crown for the Women's ODI World Champion in Navi Mumbai on Sunday. The crew is here. Firdose, Raunak, Sudarshanan, this World Cup has been some ride. For the first time, a Women's ODI World Cup final will not have either Australia or England. Who could have seen that coming? Firdose Moonda. She said that at the start of the tournament.
Did she?
I did. I did. I want us to replay
It
that.
did.
South Africa and India.
With
No, I'm not saying more than that. You all laughed at me. I said South Africa, India final. I am right. Probably for the first time in my 20-year career. And this is very exciting. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But wow, I mean, what an amazing thing. And Yash, irrespective of who wins, I think we should start by saying that this is just huge for the women's game to have the host nation India, who are really the economic powerhouse of the game, and then to have South Africa, who have had an unbelievable 2 years across all sport, not just rugby. Rugby. You can see where our brains go, not just cricket, but also rugby. And South Africa have been punching really hard for the last 2 years. So this is the final that I wanted. It's the final I wanted you to want, and now it's the final we've got.
Yeah, and as it turns out, it's the final that most of the world, barring Australia and England, is so happy to be witnessing. Raunak, for India, the first and foremost challenge, even before the game, becomes the psychological challenge, not just of a final in front of a home crowd, but also of how they ride the emotional high, the
Yeah,
dizzying heights that they've reached on Thursday.
absolutely. And I think that's the point that Amol Mazumdar and Harmanpreet Kaur would have woken up with this morning, that it is going to be so hard with the frenzy. Just look at the last 12 hours, and it's like the nation has been lifted from all its problems or all its troubles. And that's the beauty of what, especially a Women's World Cup semi-final can do. I think there is just so much more emotion and heart involved, given when the women sort of play and get results this way than in comparison to the men. And that's just perhaps, the sort of special place that women's sport occupies, when even in this country. I think that is the biggest challenge for any team when you ride such a high wave of emotion to then come back to where you can start all over again. And therein lies the disadvantage of one day less. It's an advantage come the semifinals that you have that extra day and you're staying in Mumbai. But South Africa have had that day where they can settle, and they can focus on India now, whereas India will have to just start from scratch. And I think in a large way, that might have been the reason why India fell short in 2017. The difference being they are coming up against a team that also, like themselves, have no reference point of the actual finish line. And therein lies
Yeah.
the potential for mistakes, for a packed crowd to affect South Africa more than an Australia in the final, than an England in the final, where you will have the Heather Knights of the world and the Nat Silver Brunts, or even the Australian side, who would know that they've got this game. And I really believed a large part of that semi-final that Australia had that game. Scars of England at Indore, that even if India make it a runner ball, there is a way that Australia will still snatch that game away. So it's a huge factor that India playing South Africa and not England, or not Australia in a final. And that's where I think they'll be able to. There's a little more margin of error. I might be wrong, but there is more margin of error for India, and I think therefore they will find that psychological barrier overcome in this final. So I don't see it as big a deal, given the opposition, with due respect to South Africa, who are more than capable of proving me wrong.
Yeah, that is a huge challenge for the 11 that India put out on the park, for the 15 who will play a role. And dare I say, the 16th player has a role here as well. Pratika Rawal's tournament might be over, but the psychology graduate she is, perhaps she has a role to play with her teammates in the lead up to this final. Firdaus, give the South African perspective, because for this group of South African cricketers, this is no longer unfamiliar terrain. This is now the third successive year where they are playing a Women's World Cup final.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the question has moved from can South Africa ever reach the final, which was the question we were asking probably for 30 years from 1992, to can South Africa now win a final? And we got the answer in June because the men's team won the World Test Championship final and they came from behind, right? They were on the ropes. It didn't look like they were going to win and they showed that it's possible if you stay in the game. So I think that's one thing we've seen that's very different for South African teams in the last 2 years. They stay in the game as long as possible. Yes, when they're bad, they're really bad. And they had two terrible blowouts at this World Cup, which I think they've managed to put behind them quite successfully. So, yeah, I think, Yash, the difference, I think, between South Africa and India, and, having been to India and covered cricket in India a lot, I know that it is so important for Indian fans. I know that it is what you breathe and how you get by. This is like really, really significant. Of course, it's significant for South Africa, but I think that we are a nation that moves on a little bit quicker. And because we have several sports across which the national teams do well, and I mentioned rugby earlier, but we've had a phenomenal year. We've had the women's Springboks go and reach the knockout of a World Cup. We've had our beloved Banyana, the women's football team, reach the finals of the AFCON. So I think that the pressure is a little bit less on the South African team. Just a word for the coach, Mandla Mashimbi, because he's only been in charge for 10 months. And in 10 months, he's really done a lot of work. His first few series were dismal. South Africa were obliterated by England at home. And then they went to West Indies and they lost a couple of games. And then they lost in the tri-series in Sri Lanka. So it really didn't look good coming into this World Cup. But he's a very smart coach. Mandla Mashimbi has won 9 domestic titles as an assistant coach and 2 as a head coach. So that's 11 trophies. With men's teams, sure, but he does know how to win. And so, I think he'll bring a little something different. It's very significant for South Africa, but I think it's more significant for India. And I think that could be a good thing. I think going in knowing, even if South Africa lose, cricket wins, it's okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
I'm okay.
All right.
I'm okay.
Yeah, we'll see at the end of the game who's okay with which result. But let's focus on the teams and what we can expect in this final. And so, Darshanan, another thing that has changed for India is that a month plus into the tournament, they have found the right balance. We spoke about peaking at the right time earlier on in the competition. Have they settled on the balance finally?
It looks like that. And one of the points we'd spoken in the lead up to this World Cup was how stable this Indian team was. But their stability or the ideal balance has been a result of an accident. It's an injury to an opener and then a couple of losses that has now made them find the ideal balance. Through the World Cup, there was a theme of India landing a bowler shot when they were defending, a batter shot when they were chasing. But that semi-final against Australia gave them the perfect template where they bat deep and they have enough bowling options. Jemimah Rodrigues at number 3. You almost always imagined Jemimah Rodrigues, the ODI batter, in that spot. Somehow it has taken India so long for them to arrive to the ideal position for Jamie Rodrigues and for the team combination as a whole. So, and even in that semi-final, she wasn't slated to bat at 3. That tells you how much India did not want her at number 3 almost. They had Amanjot Kaur listed at number 3. They were almost prepared to send her in. 5-minute notice is what Rodrigues got before she walked out at 3, and rest his history. So this is a very good side. I was confident of this Indian unit in the lead up to the World Cup, but looking at that semi-final performance, my confidence level has also gone up notches, and that is because of the depth of this batting lineup. They can bat till number 8, and then you have 6 bowling options. The one point which we could probably look at in that 11 is Radha Yadav versus Sneh Rana. They preferred Radha Yadav against Australia. I know an additional left-arm spinner against a right-hand heavy batting lineup, which is also the case for South Africa. There is hardly a left-handed batter. So I think India might be tempted to go with Radha Yadav, and also a little more with the bat might make them rethink. Having said that, this combination of 6 bowlers with Radha Yadav in it, given that if India has 6 bowlers, even if a bowler has a bad day, they can cover up. Whereas with Sneh Rana, you know you will get better control, and I think that would have been a better option for 5 bowling attacks. So I think irrespective of who India chose between those two sides, it's a very strong bowling attack, and I feel upbeat
Raunak, which
actually.
way do you see India going on that call? I'll just add that South Africa have lost 18 wickets to slow left arm at this World Cup.
Yeah, so it's outcome oriented, isn't it? The balance looks great looking at the outcome of the team they chose. But they went, in my view, a batter short because Radha Yadav, I mean, you have to look at Radha Yadav's career. There is the potential to become a better batter, but she's got one score in excess of 20 in her 17 ODIs. She averages in single digits as a batter in T20Is. Now you're hoping for her power hitting and her ability to hold the bat to be a value going forward, but that's not something you bank on the missing piece of the puzzle for batting depth. But against Australia, they decided that the bigger challenge right now is how are we going to get our 50 overs in, and we need multiple bowling options. And therein came the choice of Radha Yadav with her record at Navi Mumbai as well as Amanjot Kaur. It was a brave call. And it works because you ended up having the result you had. I go to what Mithali Raj said. I think a lot of us have these opinions of what is the ideal balance. But what is, without trying to sound like a guru, what is the ideal balance when it comes to the team? Right? It's the balance that makes the batters most comfortable, that makes the captain most comfortable. And if you are going to say, no, go bowler light, let the batters take more responsibility, great. That's you sitting on the outside, not the one who has to actually take the responsibility. Do you have batters that feel comfortable with that kind of balance? And therefore, India, I think, by sheer virtue of how the toss result went and the fact that Australia had the chance to outbat them but didn't, found themselves with a balance that was sufficient and with a lot of good fortune, sufficient to get over the line. We were one chance taken, one Australian catch away from seeing that lower order tested and exposed. I'll take the South Africa example. I think that's a great example of sacrificing an outright bowling option to give yourself more batting. When they went with Annika Bosch, who's not had any real form, but they decided that is what gives the batting more comfort, more insurance. And then when you see Laura Fulford play the innings that she does, you tend to think, oh, but they could have easily gone with an extra bowler. That's all hindsight wisdom. The fact that South Africa could bat and recover from multiple wickets together in clusters and post a big score because of one individual brilliant batter showed a security in that batting lineup. And then when you get an above par score, your bowling can make do with what you do. And that's what they decided they want in a semi-final. So I think both these teams have found what makes their lineup secure and comfortable. I still think South Africa's depth is actually the better depth. I liked the call of an extra batter against England, and I think they could go the same way against India. What you need to figure out here is if the great Australian team struggle to defend 338 at Navi Mumbai, everybody will struggle to defend with the wet ball at Navi Mumbai. And at that point, will India throw the ball to a Radha Yadav again or a Sneh Rana or a Kranti God? You saw how hard it was for them to defend in the group game at Visakhapatnam. So that is where I think teams will have to make one big calculation. How many bowlers do I need if I am defending? India were well and good when they were batting first, but when they were bowling first rather. But when they need to defend against a deep South African batting lineup, do they have enough faith in their bowling? I don't see them changing at the back of what's happened in the Australia game. So I think they'll go with the same team. And your point is absolutely spot on. I think Sneh Rana, as much as she was giving them with the bat, they weren't quite getting the output they wanted with the ball. And therefore, Radha Yadav's, as it was good that she got the wickets that she did at Navi Mumbai in the game against Bangladesh, and she enjoys bowling at that ground. I think that'll be the call for them. And I think South Africa will pretty much go in unchanged as well. So for me, it's that extra batting cushion that South Africa have versus the slightly compromised batting cushion that India have gone for, but it does strengthen their bowling. I think it'll come down to that.
Firdose, Wayne, how do you expect South Africa to line up?
Yeah, I think they will have to make a change. I mean, I understand all of Raunak's arguments around the batting depth, but two of that batting lineup just haven't come off at all. Annika Bosch and Annery Dirksen, and one of them's got to go because I don't think that they can go into this game with a bowling lineup that doesn't include another seam option. And for all the reasons that you've mentioned, you need to know how you can defend a total. So I see Masabata Class coming back in. I think she's the option above Tumiseko Kune, who only played a handful of games and hasn't been all that good. And I think Masabata Class will come in. Then it's about, do you want experience in Annika Bosch, who's not in form, but Annika Bosch had the great innings of her life in the semi-final of the T20 World Cup against Australia. So do you just hope it's a magic day for her? Or do you say to Annery Dirksen, this is your chance to be a hero, kid? Go out and do it. Personally, I think they're going to go with Annika Bosch. That would be just the South African way. Go with what you know, go with what you trust. And then I think Dirksen may miss out. She also didn't bowl much, right? So I think then they're getting the balance right with the ball, because then they'll have Marizan Cup, Ayabonga Kaka, Masabata Class. So swing, incredible accuracy, and a little bit of seam movement. And three spinners, Sune Lees, Chloe Tryon, Nonkululeko Malaba, who's also struggling with that hand. She got hit on the hand and it was severely bandaged up in the semi-final, but I hear that she is okay. So then three spinners, three seamers, I think that's a decent balance. But I am concerned about the team that ends up fielding second, because we saw with that dew, with that wet ball, and you've got all this unseasonal rain around. I mean, maybe we end up with an interrupted match. I'm not sure what the forecast is. So I think defending a total is going to be really, really hard. And there were times when we thought with Australia batting, 338 is more than enough kind of thing.
Yeah.
But maybe 350 wouldn't have been enough, because there were 9 balls to spare at the end. So and also, it's probably worth saying that I'm not sure that lightning strikes twice in such a short space of time. And to Raunak's point, and what I saw at the T20 World Cup last year, where South Africa beat Australia in the semi-final, sometimes you play your final before the final. And sometimes you're knackered by the time you get there, and you've expended, the energy that we saw expended from that Indian side. Jemima Rodriguez, knackered, emotionally knackered, physically knackered. That takes time to recover from. So, yeah, it'd be really interesting to see how they go, because I'll tell you that South Africa, when asked, who do you want to play in the final? They said, we want India because we want the crowd. And that is a big, fat lie. They do not want that. They didn't want Australia. But, this crowd, and I know Indian fans also love South Africa. You've always been good to us over the years. Of course, it'll be a partisan crowd, but I hope it's an appreciative crowd. And that when or if there are moments where there is something to appreciate from a South African perspective, I hope we see that. I really want to see an amazing game of cricket. I want to see whatever happens. I think somebody is going to win big, and all of us are going to win big. So I've said it twice, so I'm sounding a little bit ridiculous, but that's what I'm here for. That's why.
Sorry, just a quick one, Yash. That I see Firdose's point of bringing class in likelier against India at this venue, and it could have been against England at Guwahati, where it has been a little more problematic for the batters. So it could have been that call, and that's where Mushimbi and Pulfard have been excellent, and I give them full marks. They played Tumiseko Kune at Vizag as well, which is a really smart call. I don't think Sekukune will work in these conditions. The pace off didn't work for Annabelle Sutherland, so that's a call they'll have to make. But yeah, there is more logic to bringing an extra bowler in, or a specialist bowler like Klaas in here. And maybe if it was just England at Guwahati, given how the last fixture went there, that prompted them to go a bit excess on batting. So yeah, point taken entirely.
All right, Suds, why don't you jump in with the matchups or the phases in either innings which you think are likeliest to define this final?
Again, I think for long, I thought Marizan Cup in this World Cup isn't firing. What is happening? And there she turns up in that semi-final with a 5-wicket haul and becomes the leading wicket taker in World Cup. So I'm going to have and train my eyes on her once again against India's batters. Superb record against key batters for England. And once again, she has superb record against key India batters. Smriti Mandhana, she's got her thrice in some innings. 4 times she's dismissed Harmanpreet Kaur as well. So these two are the battles at the top of my mind. But it's also about, I'm also looking how South Africa use her, because yes, she's dismissed Smriti Mandhana with that new ball swing and whatnot. But we've seen the humid weather gets to these players in Navi Mumbai. So I'd also like to see if Nonkululeko Mlaba comes in a little earlier, because she also has dismissed Smriti Mandhana thrice. Mandhana in this latest avatar likes to attack bowlers, likes to attack spin, but left-arm spinner, will she take her on? Will Malaba enjoy it? I'm sure she'll enjoy, but so these two are a couple of South Africa bowlers versus the India batters. And when India bowl, can't really take your eyes off Deepti Sharma in a very big match. I mean, we saw against Australia, She did not pick wickets in heaps. She was, in fact, reverse swept, switch hit by a Phoebe Litchfield, kept her calm, came back in the end. So she matches up well to Laura Wolfart as well. She matches up well to Marizan Kaap. And these two aren't any other batters. They are superb players against spin. But Deepthi has multiple dismissals against both of them. She's dismissed both of those batters, in fact, thrice in ODI cricket. So these two are the big matchups I'm looking forward to.
All right. Raunak, jump in. Enter rapid fire mode. The keys for India. For you, what are the most imperative boxes to tick?
Yeah, I just think that player for player, India have more players in form, and the back of the semi-final that they could do it without Smriti Mandhana, which we thought was perhaps impossible. If India have to chase 330, Mandhana has to get at least 50, if not more. But the fact that Harmanpreet Kaur, my God, we may be frustrated with the lack of consistency, but she is clutch. She is big stage, and you can't deny the captain's contribution with the bat. Even if we have all sorts of opinions of her bowling changes and whatnot in the first innings, it's amazing how she puts that aside and performs. So there is legacies to be sort of ticked off here and rounded off. I think India do not rely as heavily on one or two players like South Africa rely on Fulfart and Kaap. And I think if Fulfart and Kaap play well, then everyone else then can be a threat. But India, I think, are greater than the sum of their parts right now. So for me, so this has brought up the correct matchups. I see India going in with the same side, and I see them being really up for this. I hope it's a close game. I just fear that one of the two teams, it could be India, that suddenly will just, it's the other extreme of the semi-final high that you just implode on the day of the final. I hope that doesn't happen, but I think the teams match up otherwise quite well. If Fulfart and Kaap can at least play reasonably to their potential, then that is enough for South Africa to make a fight of it. But I still think India are favorites, so I'm going to back the home team.
Firdose, same question for you. Where are South Africa looking?
I think Chloe Tryon, actually, we haven't really mentioned her, but she's had a really good World Cup, couple of 50s. It's probably the last World Cup of her career, though she's not said so, the last ODI World Cup, that is. And Chloe Tryon and Marizan Kaap are two of the original 6 who were contracted by Cricket South Africa in 2013. They only contracted half a team, hey? So that's what we're talking about when you go back 12 years ago. So this is a full circle moment for the two of them, and I know that it means absolutely everything to them. And they've been talking a big game. South Africans like to talk a big game, but theirs has been particularly big this time. So I think she'll be a very important contributor. Of course, Nadine de Klerk, we can't discount. She's also had an excellent World Cup. She's seeing the ball, really well. She's hitting it nice and hard. There've been a few comments around comparisons to Lance Klusener back home. I can tell you Lance Klusener's not watching at all because he's a man that doesn't watch a lot of cricket, but he'll be very excited to see somebody performing in the vein that he did. Yeah. And then Nonkululeko Malaba, who she had a quiet semi-final, and I think this is an important tournament for her. She may not be a star performer. She's quite young, and we've often seen her freeze in bigger moments. So I'm interested to see how she goes on the biggest stage of all, knowing, as Raunak said, this is legacy creating. She'll have 2-3 more World Cups to go, so we'll see a lot more of her. But, really, this is about what you're saying to the world. And she said to me in the interview I did last week that she doesn't get league deals around the world, and she thinks it's because she can't really bat and she can't really field very well. But also she doesn't care, because she is now earning a salary to provide for her family, and she's trying to create some sort of generational wealth that was absent before. And this is a chance for her to really make a name for herself, to show the world, even if a left arm spinner isn't like a hot commodity on the league stage, maybe just have a look at me because I do have something to offer. So yeah, I think that's where they'll be looking. Obviously, Laura Wolfart, you've mentioned, the ice cold captain, who I hope shows a little bit of something tomorrow. I think this means a lot to her too. Marizan Kaap, and have a look at the dugout, because Mandla Mashimbi, I think, has got a few tricks up his sleeve that we haven't seen yet, and he's been inspirational to this group of players. So yeah, I think it's a good chance. Look, I agree with you. I think India are the favorites, and there's no getting away from that. They've got player 16 in Pratik Rawal, and then they've got player 1.369 billion in the whole rest of the country, right? So they've got everything on their side. We're a small nation compared to you, 64 million back home, of which maybe 10 million will have access to watching the game, if that. And we just want to see the team do well, and they've done well already. So I do think India are the favorites, and I think it's theirs to lose. I really feel that's like over to you, India. This is your moment, and I want to see whether they take it.
All right, that is the setup done. This is not a game where I'm going to waste any time asking for predictions, but I do want all of you to chip in very quickly with one wish for the final from each of you. Let's start with you, Sur.
Oh,
I think I'm going to zoom out from just the game and look at the bigger picture. I like the crowds that have been coming in, particularly in Navi Mumbai. So the one thing I want to see and be a takeaway for the tournament as a whole is for games to go to these big cities where there is fan base for women's cricket. That's the only hope I have, because the crowd in the semi-final, the noise they were making, you can see that in almost every other Indian men's game across the world. But for the Indian women's team, this Navi Mumbai venue has been a special one. And to see crowds come in, and this should be a lesson that these are the venues you need to take the World Cups and the big tournaments to. So that is the one thing I want to as a takeaway from the final.
All right, Raunak.
I will go for players that have actually been key to their team's success, but not necessarily had the spotlight or had the player of the match awards going their way. So I'll go with Sri Charni, whose efforts were rightly, like overshadowed by all the emotion. But to bowl like that for the second time in the tournament against Australia, if you get one or two bowlers bowling 10 good overs, sometimes that's enough. That makes the chase 330 gettable and not 365, 370. But you had Kranti expensive, you had Deepti expensive, you had Renuka who had to be managed. So I'd love to see Sri Charni, and to a degree even Kranti God, players who would not have imagined this time last year that they'll be playing a World Cup final. Harmanpreet Kaur would have been dreaming of a World Cup final for 8 years, Smriti Mandhana for about 6 or 7 years, Deepti Sharma for just as long. So I'd love to see those players light up the final stage, and the same for a South Africa. The spotlight will rightly be on Fulfat, maybe Sunellis and Marizan Kapp, but how amazing would it be for Nadine de Klerk, or for that matter for Henry Derksen, if she gets the chance to signal that this is what the next few years of women's cricket will be, because every World Cup draws a line, and we will see a number of legacy players walk out. Sophie Devine started that, and we'll probably not see Heather Knight at a World Cup again. Alyssa Healy, Elise Perry, maybe Harmanpreet Kaur. So yeah, I'd love to see this being the promise of this World Cup being here to stay as a marquee event across wherever it's played. I don't think we have a confirmed venue for or host for the next 50 overs World Cup, which will be announced soon. But I want this to be the game that leaves no doubt that this is a tournament that the world wants and waits for, just like it does for the 50 overs men's World Cup.
Firdose.
I want to see tears, because I love a bit of tears at a sporting event. And I don't want the tears to be tears of too much sadness. I want to see some happy tears from people who have invested a lot in making the women's game professional. So I think we're now at like the closing of the chapter of the pioneering generation. And from now on, in most countries, women's sport is professional and women's cricket is professionalized. So I want to see people perform in a way that reflects what it means for the game to have evolved so dramatically, so dramatically in about a dozen years. And I'll definitely have tears, because that's just who I am. I was very upset when I saw Jemmy crying. I was like, we've got the copyright on tears. Now, why are the Indian guys all crying? South Africans are supposed to cry. So I want to see, I just want to see that there's a real passion and investment in the game. And I think it's going to be a great game. I do share Raunak's fear that there's no blowout, but I'm looking forward to a cracking final.
Sorry, I just want to, before we wrap up, just throw this in, because it's been a conversation I've had with a lot of my co-commentators, that this is a win for ODI cricket as a format. And we need to remind the world that, because this is perhaps the format under scrutiny throughout, where bilateral cricket seems most meaningless, least incentivizing to schedule outside of the big 2 or 3. But no other format will make you feel the roller coaster of emotions up and down once it's competitive. If it's not competitive, it can be challenging. But while T20 cricket is more consistently competitive, it also extracts less from an emotional standpoint from the viewer. And that's why there is such great recall value in ODI World Cups and special ODI games. So like it is for both the men's and women's games, this is the format that will always be the ultimate format for World Cup cricket. If it evolves into just World Cup cricket with a little bit of internationals here and there, so be it. But let's remind ourselves that ODI cricket isn't going anywhere. And it occupies a very special place in the international calendar.
Point taken. I'm going to throw in my wish, continuing from where Firdose left off. I hope that the waterworks are limited to the ground because I'll be looking upwards. It's an ominous looking weekend. I hope the weather does not come into the picture and we can enjoy ourselves. What is going to be a truly special final. Firdose, Raunak, Sud, thank you so much for setting it up for us. This isn't just a final, it's a date with destiny.